Breaking news, musician, actor, and artist David Bowie has died.
The last 24 hours of David Bowie, January 9th, 2016, began like any other quiet winter day in New York City. Inside a modest apartment in the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan, one of music's most iconic figures was spending what no one yet realized would be his final full day on Earth. David Bowie, the chameleon of rock, the starman himself, was facing the end, but the world didn't know. To those outside his tight inner circle, Bowie seemed alive and well. Just one day earlier, he had released his 25th studio album, Blackstar, on his 69th birthday. Fans were thrilled, critics were raving. Nobody imagined that within hours, he would be gone forever. David Bowie, born David Robert Jones in Brixton, London, wasn't just a singer, he was a cultural shapeshifter. From Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, he had a gift for transformation that kept him decades ahead of the curve. He influenced fashion, film, sexuality, and the very nature of celebrity. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, he pushed boundaries. Musically, he moved from glam rock to soul, from Berlin-era experimentation to mainstream pop superstardom. Personally, he lived boldly, flirting with androgyny, discussing his sexuality openly, and crafting characters that blurred the line between man and myth. But like all legends, Bowie was also human. In his final years, the pace slowed. His appearances became rare, and behind the curtain, he was quietly facing the most profound transformation of all, his own mortality. In the summer of 2014, while working on the single Sue or In a Season of Crime, Bowie was diagnosed with liver cancer. He kept it secret, even from many close friends and collaborators. Only his wife, Iman, his children, and a few trusted colleagues knew the truth. By the fall of 2015, doctors delivered the news. The cancer had spread. There would be no recovery. Still, Bowie pressed forward. He spent those final months finishing Blackstar, working on the stage production Lazarus, and filming the music video for the title track. Even after learning the cancer was terminal, he continued creating, leaving behind a body of work that would serve as his farewell. Director Johan Renck later recalled that Bowie learned his illness was terminal while shooting the Lazarus video. He didn't stop. He just said, "That's how I want it to be." Saturday, January 9th, 2016, was cold and quiet in New York. Inside his apartment, Bowie was with his wife, Iman, and their teenage daughter, Lexi. There was no public appearance, no final interview, no dramatic scene. Instead, it was a normal day. The album Blackstar had been released just 24 hours earlier. Bowie had reportedly received news of its early success. It debuted at #1 in the UK and would soon do the same in the US, the first and only time he topped the Billboard charts in his lifetime. He didn't celebrate with champagne or cameras. He remained at home in his final days under palliative care. Doctors and nurses likely focused on easing his pain and helping him rest. He had stopped treatment weeks earlier. His energy was fading fast. As Saturday, January 9th, 2016, faded into night, David Bowie remained inside his apartment on Lafayette Street in Soho, Manhattan. The apartment was quiet, the lights dim. He was in the final stages of liver cancer, and his body had grown too weak for movement. At 4 p.m., his private nurse noted that he was resting but more fatigued than usual. Bowie's breathing was slower, and his appetite had vanished completely. By 6:30 p.m., his wife Iman returned from a brief outing to pick up some items and sat beside him in the bedroom, holding his hand. Their daughter Lexi quietly painted at the dining table. Bowie could no longer speak in full sentences, but he acknowledged Iman's presence with a faint smile. That evening, he wore a navy silk robe, and next to his bed sat a sketchbook filled with final handwritten lyrics and visual notes. At 8 p.m., the nurse helped him sit upright for a short time. Duncan Jones, Bowie's son from his first marriage, had arrived in New York earlier that week and visited briefly that evening. They exchanged few words, perhaps just a glance or a nod. Duncan later said that his father was peaceful and composed, as if he had come to terms with everything. At 10 p.m., Iman showed David a glowing online review of Blackstar, which had just been released on his birthday the day before. Bowie looked at the screen for a few seconds, then closed his eyes again. A gentle instrumental track from Low, one of his favorite albums, played softly in the background. By 11:30 p.m., the nurse administered a final dose of medication for pain and shortness of breath. He drifted into a drowsy, half-sleep state. At 12:45 a.m. on Sunday, January 10th, Bowie briefly opened his eyes. According to the nurse, he looked at Iman and said something barely audible. Iman never shared what he said, but later described the moment as deeply personal and loving. At 2 a.m., his breathing grew more shallow. The nurse checked his pulse. It was slowing. The family was told that the time was near. At 4:15 a.m., Lexi quietly stepped into the room and sat at the foot of the bed. Duncan was seated nearby. No one spoke. They simply remained with him. At 6:15 a.m., David Bowie took his final breath. There were no machines, no doctors in white coats, no reporters outside the window. Just family, silence, and the final moments of a man who had shaped the sound and soul of generations. The news broke late on January 10th. David Bowie has died at age 69 after an 18-month battle with cancer. Fans were stunned. No one knew he was ill. The release of Blackstar just 2 days earlier seemed like a rebirth. Instead, it was a goodbye. Tributes poured in from around the world.
Rest in peace, David Bowie. Great artist. Oh. One-of-a-kind singer, songwriter, actor, fashion icon, mad genius, who also had one of the greatest senses of humor of anyone I've ever met.
Crowds gathered in Brixton, London, his birthplace, and in Berlin, where he had once escaped fame to rediscover himself. In New York, people left flowers and handwritten notes on the sidewalk outside his building. Paul McCartney wrote, "His star will shine in the sky forever." 2 days later, Bowie was quietly cremated in New Jersey. There was no public funeral, no memorial service. Per his wishes, his ashes were scattered in Bali in a private Buddhist ceremony, one final mystery in a life filled with them. Later, it was revealed that Bowie had carefully planned every detail of his final year. He knew Blackstar would be his last album. He knew Lazarus would be interpreted as a farewell. He knew the world would search his lyrics for clues, and he gave them just enough to wonder. His son, director Duncan Jones, shared a letter written by a palliative care doctor thanking Bowie for how he handled his death. It read, "You made it okay to talk about dying." And Bowie had already begun that conversation in the only way he knew best, through his art. "Look up here, I'm in heaven."
Look up here, I'm in heaven.
That haunting line opened Lazarus, his final single, his farewell in plain sight. David Bowie didn't go out under stage lights or to the sound of applause. There was no encore, no curtain call. He left this world the way he had lived in it, on his own terms, quietly defiant, brilliantly composed. In those final hours, he wasn't Ziggy or the Thin White Duke. He was just David, husband, father, artist. His death wasn't loud, it was deliberate, it was graceful. It was the final performance in a life devoted to reinvention. And like all great art, it still echoes.